Welcome, Shanet. We're excited and we are looking forward to what you have to say and tell us today.
Thank you. My name is Shanet. I am the head penguin keeper and animal health technician at the Tertians Aquarium. So I'm going to be talking about penguins as well. I know you guys had a lot today about penguins. Alison Koch was there. Dr. Alison Koch had a lot to say and really good stuff to say about the African penguin and what is happening and what we, as the people of the penguin community, are doing. And so has Cloverly from Shark Spotters, who's also engaged with the penguin community and done a lot with a lot of the people around us. So I'm going to continue on that conversation. I know some of the stuff is repetitive, but it's to emphasize how important the African penguin is to South Africa and to us that are working with the birds as they are an endangered species. There's about 18 penguin species all over the world, and all the species, or all the penguins in particular, are found in the southern hemisphere, or they live in the southern hemisphere, apart from one, which is the Galapagos penguin that lives in the Galapagos Islands. But notice the images that I've shown you on the screen. There are 4 species of penguin that look exactly the same. So our main focus today will be on the African penguin. But the African black-footed penguin, or the African penguin, also falls under the banded penguins. Apologies for my the branded over there. That's supposed to be banded. But they fall under the banded penguins, which means that these are penguins that have this nice dark black band across their chest, and some of them also have some spots. So they're all divided, or all sectioned into all the 18 penguin species are sectioned into different groups. So you get the crested penguins, which are all the penguins with the yellow feathers, and those are the macaroni penguins, the rockhopper penguins, the Pureland penguins. Those are all the penguins that you see that are known as crested. And then you get the large penguin, which is mainly the emperor penguin and the king penguin. You get the brush-tailed penguins, which are the Adelie penguins, the chin-strap penguins, and the gentoo penguins. And those are the ones with nice long tails that tend to wag on the floor. And then the banded penguin, which is the Magellanic penguin, the Galapagos penguin, the Humboldt, and the African penguin. So African penguins are found on the southern African coastline, all the way from Namibia, goes all the way down to South Africa, and then it goes up the coast to St. Croix, and then also known as Quebeca. That's up in the Eastern Cape or Port Elizabeth side. And the penguin species is very special to South Africa because it's the only African, or it's the only penguin found along our coast. And I think a lot of us have stressed a lot that penguins are depleting. There is a threat around the African penguin, and that is due to many concerns that has happened throughout the time the African penguin has been around. So in the early 1900s, there's an island called Eisefontein. And this is an image of Eisefontein in the early 1900s, where there were almost 1.5 million penguins on the island. So you can imagine how many black and white images you'd see, and you just hear this donkey-like bray sound that these penguins are making. And currently, with the status that we have at the moment, there's less than 40,000 penguins left. I think that is also quite a shocking number. And to look at the images at the moment, it does show a major concern with what is happening in the penguin colonies, what is happening with climate change, what is happening around there. And that is what we need to ask ourselves. Maria, you can go to the next slide. So in this image over here, you can actually see, this is just on the same, on Dasson Island, which is just a few minutes outside of Cape Town. It's all along the west coast. There's been a couple of scientists that have been around that island to take pictures and to do some research on the wild penguin colony over there. But looking at the contrast, in the 1900s, there was it was completely covered with guano, known as white gold. It was completely covered with penguin eggs. It was completely covered with penguins. And you can see how there's a guy standing on the rock, and he could barely step onto the floor or onto the land surface area because it was completely full of penguins. And then going up into 2014, almost to the going in the new century, you can see same picture with a little bird on the top of the rock, but no penguins. So that is the big question: what happened to the penguins? Why did they disperse so quickly from the planet or from the southern hemisphere? So looking at I'm not going to go, I won't go into detail about why they disappeared now, because I will talk about that a bit later. But I think there was so much conversation about that happening that like the emphasis on what the concerns are is very, very dramatic, and it's very important for us to understand and help in every way we can. But I'm going to talk more about the anatomy of the penguin, and I think we haven't really spoken about that on the previous two presentations. And I think this is quite an interesting point of the penguin, because you can actually understand, the little body postures and how they are made for water. So we're going to start from the head and then go slowly down to the rest of the body, and then we'll end off with the feet. Just talk a bit about the skull and the head of the African penguin. So overall, African penguins have 112 bones. It's a lot of bones for a tiny little bird like that. These birds are made for the water, not mostly for land. So the word waddle, Aisha mentioned waddle earlier on. The word waddle is because of the way they walk on land. They very unbalanced, put it in that way. And most of the time when they do step on land, they tend to fall over their own feet. So looking at the bone structure of a penguin, they aren't made for flying. So their bones have less air in them, and that is why they tend to be more dense. They tend to be a lot heavier than a normal bird, because they don't need to fly. They don't need to be on land the way a flying bird or a duck needs to be on land. So everything seems compact around the African penguin bone structure, which is why they are so different, why they are different to the rest of the other type of birds that you see. So looking at the penguin in an overall image, we're going to go slowly around it by looking at the beak first. And so the beaks are made of keratin, so same as your nails. The beaks they grow quite quickly, and in the wild, these birds tend to rub themselves against rocks. They rub themselves against anything that they can find that can help break down that keratin on the beak structure, so that they can actually able to eat, able to claw on things, and also able to just have that nice sharp look of the African penguin. Sorry. So everything around the beak is very important, because on top of the beak, or just on the sides of the beak, they also have something called nares, or the little nostrils. And if that gets blocked up with salt content, or it gets blocked up with fish, it can cause complications around how the bird is able to adjust itself to the environment. So just behind that nares, or behind the beak, they've got the eyes, and their eyes are quite immaculate. They have this third eyelid, which cats and dogs have as well. And those of you that do have animals, you can actually, when you go home, have a look at your pet, and you can see this little thin layer that goes across the eye. And that thin layer is called a third eyelid, or a nictitating membrane. So it's quite a cool character of the penguin, just because when they're out of water, things seem to be a bit blurry on a penguin. And so the minute they open that eyelid and it goes over the eye, it protects the eye from anything that can go in. So protecting the eye from sand, protecting the eye from a lot of the sunlight. It protects the eye from water going in and drying out the eye. And that also allows the bird to see quite clearly underwater. So yeah, so that third eyelid is a really nice character of the penguins. And we as humans also have, I mean, our eyelids go up and down. Their eyelids go left to right. So it's a nice concept that if we have something in our eyes, we generally like blink our eyes a couple of times. And in order for us to get rid of something, we rub our eyes, where penguins don't have that ability. So the third eyelid is that actual character for them to remove whatever they need out of their eyes. Now, looking at the next picture, I think you can go on to the next one. They've got this nice they've got this nice claw on the end of the beak, but also they've got this long tongue. Now, again, if we compare a penguin tongue to human tongues, our tongues are long, but it doesn't go all the way to the back. And so penguin tongues have they've got a long face-looking tongue, and it goes all the way down to the back of their throats or back of the esophagus. And it's filled with this tiny little bristles. So these are keratinized bristles, and they work individually. And it's a very weird feeling for me in particular, because I work with them. I do feel their tongues on a day-to-day basis when I do feed them. And it feels like little toothbrushes on your finger. So these keratinized bristles are very important for a penguin, especially when they eat, because it works individually and it helps it helps with them swallowing fish or swallowing squid or prawn or whatever the penguin eats down into the stomach. So the tongue helps also with getting rid of anything that they can't swallow, especially if it's scales or if it's something that is on the fish that the penguins shouldn't be eating. That ability is also there, and that bristle ability is also there for them to make use of. A fun fact or an interesting fact, penguins don't have any taste buds. So we can feed them as much fish as possible and they don't taste the fish. Whereas me and you as humans and other animals do have some taste buds, especially if you look at your cat or your dog. They tend to like certain things, whereas penguins, you can give them a poultry, you can give them an anchovy, they will eat both. You can go into a close-up image, sorry, Marie, you can go to a close-up image of the penguin, and we will look at the body cavity or the throat, the thoracic cavity of the penguin, and that was on the skeleton image, but we'll look at the penguin overall. And so the general consensus of a weight of a penguin is between 1.5 to 2.5 kilos. And that's like picking up a sugar bag every day. So as keepers, one of our tasks on a day-to-day basis is to handle these birds one-on-one. And I think when you start picking up 2, 3, 4 penguins a day, you start building that muscle in the arms. So it's quite an interesting way of also learning how to manage a heavy penguin, especially when you become a researcher. And I think Alison mentioned it as well, where they go out into the wild and they do tagging, and they interact with the wild birds. It's exactly the same as interacting with birds in a captive facility. So yeah, an average weight of a penguin is between 1.5 and 2.5 kilograms, and they're not that very tall. So they basically fit just next to a ruler, about 30 to 33 centimeters. So they're not as big as what a lot of people expect, especially when people are not familiar with penguins, and everybody just assumes that all penguins will grow as big as the king penguin or the emperor penguin, because that is what is always known on TV, not so much the African penguin or the rockhopper penguin or the gentoos or the Magellanics. A lot of the time, those are confused or misjudged with the king penguin or the emperor penguin. Now, unlike birds and chickens have something called a crop. So a crop is where animals get to store their food. And birds eat worms, they eat seeds. Chickens eat seeds and they eat all sorts of other little critters that are in the ground, they're able to store their food. Whereas penguins don't, then they can't store their food. So whatever they eat, it goes straight down the esophagus, down to the stomach, and it digests almost immediately. So the digestive system is quite strong, and the reason why it's a very strong digestive system is because they feed their babies manually, whereas birds and chickens and ducks don't. The chickens and ducks tend to teach their younglings to eat. Birds tend to physically feed their young ones, and penguins as well. Penguins regurgitate food to the younglings, or to the chicks. So their digestive system needs to break down as much of the bones, as much as of the head, and as much of the calcium and other nutrients that they need in order to feed the babies. So looking at the penguin in general, they very hardy animals, and so these birds are able to fall on their stomachs and not really have bad injuries or not have an injury at all because of their protective stomach fat. So it's quite interesting to see how they're able to balance themselves and how they're able to just adapt to life or adapt to the harsh environments that we have out there in the wild. So yeah, their stomach is completely made of blubber, and it also helps with buoyancy around where they swim as well. So talking about that is a yoga. Talking about their flippers. So that was a nice image of a yoga moving around and flapping his flippers over there. And that is because penguins don't need the light bone structure. They're not made for flying, so their bones tend to be a lot shorter. And if you look at the corner where the elbow sits, and that's just where Yoba's flapping his flippers now, and he's going to bend it slightly. And that's where the elbow and the wrist kind of seem to fuse with each other. So the flippers are covered in more like a short scale-like type of feather, and it's very constricted, and that allows them to glide through water instantly. So a penguin can swim about 20 kilometers an hour. They're able to glide through the kelp. They're able to be streamlined through water, and they need to be fast. I mean, trying to catch a live fish or a live squid, you do need to be agile, and you do need to move quite swiftly through whatever you have in order to catch your food. Now, looking at the what we see in front of us now, that is a penguin pouch. So birds, also all birds have a little pouch, just like a kangaroo. Kangaroo's got a pouch as well, and they keep their babies, known as a joey. They keep their babies in the pouch, but penguins don't. Penguins are birds. They do lay eggs. So each bird would lay, or each couple would generally lay about 2 eggs, and they need to share the parent skills. So they tend to incubate the eggs quite nicely with that pouch that's opened up there over there. And the pouch itself is about it's about 36 degrees warm inside there, so it helps incubate the eggs quite nicely. They also use the beaks to roll the eggs around, which is very important because you can't keep one side of the egg warm and not the other side of the egg. Otherwise, the birds will tend to, otherwise the egg won't hatch. So it's very important for that pouch to show its active activity, it's very important for the pouch to be active, but also to allow air to breathe through the pouch, but then also keep the eggs warm around that particular area. In the same video, you can see the black feet of the penguin. Hence, they're known as the African black-footed penguin. So in the past, they were known as the jackass penguin, and they had a donkey-like gray sound. But at the same time, we've got the Magellanic penguin that also makes a similar sound. We've got the Galapagos penguin that also makes that similar sound. And so you can't call all of them the jackass penguin, because then how do you distinguish the difference between the two? So Cape Town, South Africa, we're quite lucky. We've got a penguin right here on our doorstep. We can go see them at Boulders Beach. You can see them at Stony Point. Those are the two locations, and Robben Island. Those are the three locations where you're able to see penguins out in the wild on a Twitter site. And so we've opted to give them the change the name from jackass penguin to the African black-footed penguin or the African penguin, simply because they do live on our coastline. They are African penguins and they are endemic to our coastline. So it's a really, really interesting concept of the African penguin. But having web-like feet also is very helpful for the birds, because not only do they need their flippers to swim, but they also need that web-like feet to help them and adjust in water. So this webbed feet can also help grip onto rocks. It helps them grip onto when they're busy climbing, because they walk quite far distances, they use their little toes to claw onto whatever they need and then lift themselves up with their flippers, and then use that flat back of that flat bottom surface of the black feet to lift themselves and to stand sturdy on whatever they need. However, with webbed feet, there's also some problems and some illnesses and diseases that birds can occur. And one of the big illnesses, or one of the big concerns that penguins get, web-like animals get, chickens get this, even pet rats get this, and it's called bumblefoot. And bumblefoot is a very serious bacteria that builds up onto the, it's a very serious bacteria that builds up onto the bottom of the feet. And that is because the surface area around those particular places where the penguins walk is not, it's not irregular. So it's all regular, meaning there's one substrate, and that means that the penguins' feet don't get this posturpedic feeling around where they walk. So when they keep to one surface, it flattens the foot underneath, making the area very soft and sensitive. And sometimes that puncture wound can end up on the bottom of the foot. When that puncture wound ends up, it's very painful. It's like when you have pimples on your face from acne, you get pus around that area, you press the pus out, and then that area is exposed to whatever bacteria is now out in the air. When the wind blows and the dust blows up against that open pimple, more pimples will arise. And the same happens with our penguin feet. When penguins walk and they puncture that foot, there's a small wound, and they end up walking into their own fecal matter, the white gold, the guano. And guano carries a lot of bacteria. The ammonia is very high around the guano. And so when that happens, there's a buildup of bacteria on that foot, and that becomes a concern for the penguin. Now, in captivity, or in a captive environment, penguins are very fortunate, and other webbed feet animals are also very fortunate. You can go on to the next slide, Marie. Penguins and other webbed feet animals are very fortunate because they've got keepers to help and assess the feet on a daily, weekly, monthly basis. And in the wild, there is no one. So when no one is able to look at that, there's a lot of other infections that can arise amongst the penguin feet. Next slide. So here we're going to see how penguins preen. If you look at them, again, that is Ayoba. Ayoba is one of our, and Zuki, they are our picture perfect penguins. They tend to they like to show their faces around on a lot of cameras. So looking at this image over here, we've got a lot of penguins that preen themselves. And preening is a very important concept or very important activity that these birds need to do. So penguins have a double layer of feathers. So they've got that nice blubber, that fat that keeps them warm on the inside and keeps the body warm and allows them to be out in the harsh environment. And then they've got two sets of feathers. So the outer layer that you see on the bird is known as the waterproof set of feathers. And then the inner layer is known as the down feathers, and that's similar to the down feathers that you would find in a down pillow. Not exactly from a penguin, but it could be from a duck, it could be from a bird. And those down feathers don't get wet. They are the ones that keep the bird warm on the inside, that stays dry. But a penguin often, or they need to preen in order to get some air circulation around the body. They need to also keep their feathers clean, because they also go through a process called molting. And molting is when penguins look quite scruffy. They feel very sorry for themselves, but it's also a very important process that penguins go through. We call it a catastrophic molt. And this is when, during a certain time period of the year, they lose the old set of feathers because the feathers have started deteriorating. That's the waterproof feathers that start deteriorating. They need to fall out, and they need to regrow a new set of feathers. And this process takes about 12 to 36 days for them to complete that molting period, where the down feathers start pushing all the old feathers off the body. They become itchy. They start scratching themselves against rocks. They start going to their big partners, and they start pulling their feathers out, and then the new feathers start to grow all over the body. So there's a bird on the back rock over there, and she is showing you a very, very good example of what will exactly happen. So all the old feathers start falling out, and then they will end up looking like this brand new feathers over there. But not only do the feathers help them with keeping the body looking pretty, keeping the body warm, but the feathers are also light, and they need to be light in order for the birds to swim. Remember, their body is heavy, their bone structure is quite heavy and it's dense, so they need the feathers to be very, very light, and this allows them to be agile with their movements. Penguins are very, very fast, especially when they're protecting their eggs or when they are looking after the partner, or when they're looking after their chicks. They need to be very agile with that head, with those flippers, with the feet, and with the rest of the body. Now, penguins are monomorphic. So monomorphic is monomorphic is when penguins look almost exactly the same. The male birds are slightly bigger than a female penguin, although there are exceptions to a few. But generally, male penguins are, but generally, penguins do look exactly the same. So you can't tell whether a bird is male or female. We have to do DNA testing. And that's the most accurate way to identify who's a male and who's a female. Now, most of the time in a facility, we get the names wrong, but that all adds character to the penguins. So this image in front of you, we've got a penguin named La Bamba, and we've got a penguin named Chuck. What is very important about couples is that they have this distinctive calls as well. So distinctive calls, it's important to birds because there's an ecstatic call and then there's a contact call. And contact calls are usually when one partner is gone. So often penguins would separate when they go swim. So when that happens, it's either the male goes to swim for a day or two and goes and forages for food, or the female will go out for a day or two and goes and forages for food. And when they come back, even though they might know the route back to their nest, they still need to call for their partner. They still need to call for their partner. And once they do this contact call, the other partner is able to identify exactly where that bird is or exactly who the bird is calling. So to me and you, that contact call might sound almost exactly the same. And there can be 5 birds doing that same contact call, but their partners will know exactly who they're calling for. And then you also get the ecstatic display call. And the ecstatic display call is when the birds tend to almost sing, which is quite an interesting, and it's quite a nice little process, and it's nice to hear. And I think I've got one here. I don't know if Maria, that image will play. So that's an ecstatic call, and looking at this one that Ayub is doing now, that is a contact call. So in this video footage, you can see they're all calling, and they're calling for their partners, and the partners are swimming. But these partners know exactly who they're calling and why they're calling. Sometimes it's just because the one partner's been away for too long. Sometimes it's just to know where are you, so that I can see you. What is also an interesting fact about penguins is they do lay 2 eggs per season. And I think I've got an egg right here. Let me just put my screen on. Got some eggs. There we go. So this is an actual penguin egg. There we go. This is an actual penguin egg. Penguin eggs weigh about, oh, my screen is so bad. Sorry, guys. But penguin eggs weigh between 90 and 100 grams when it's laid. And usually between that time, the eggs are, the first egg is laid, and then about 5 to 7 days later, the second egg is laid. And what's very important is that those eggs need to be weighed. So going back to what has happened, talking about eggs now, going back to what has happened in the past. In the early 1900s, we had millions and millions and millions of penguins. We had millions and millions of eggs, and eggs started being harvested. And I think you guys heard quite a lot about eggs being harvested, which is very, very sad, because it wasn't just used for eating, but it was also used as a delicacy in and around parliament areas, and was used for export as well. So that led to one of the major concerns as to why we don't have so many penguins. It was about 500,000 eggs per season that was removed annually for human use. So during that time, not only did people harvest eggs, but penguins were also collected, and the Portuguese used to they started when the Portuguese came over. They caught eggs, they caught penguins, and they started and they preserved the penguins as well. So penguins were caught, preserved, kept in a freezer for long voyages, and penguins were eaten. So I don't necessarily know how a penguin would taste, but we did have people eating and harvesting these animals back in the day. So at the aquarium, we have a colony, and we've got about 30 African penguins on our beach. We also have a set of rock hopper penguins. And my main job at the aquarium is to look after the animals in a husbandry point of view. I look at the animal welfare of the penguins, and I do a lot of education around why we have African penguins in the aquarium, in a facility, and what their purpose is. So our purpose is that the African penguins are under threat. There's a lot of causes that have brought the African penguin into this environment right now. Habitat destruction is one of the major concerns. We spoke about Boulders Beach. Boulders Beach is a very stable colony right now, but around Boulders Beach, there are also a lot of houses and a lot of urbanization happening. And then we have climate change, and the weather conditions around climate change and global warming is changing every single day. What's really nice is that looking at the images now, this is from Boulders Beach itself. I know Dr. Alison Cox spoke about nests, and you guys were asking about what type of nests we use. So these are the various types of nests shown at Boulders Beach. It was the cemented ones, and then we've had the fiberglass ones. And the fiberglass ones comes in different styles, just because there's still a lot of research around what is better for the birds. So going into climate change, birds are exposed to all the elements from the weather conditions. And that is once again based on what has happened in the past. When the guano was stripped from the island, penguins had no places to nest because they used to nest inside the guano. And that is where the other name comes as burrowing penguins. So couples tend to burrow. They would burrow about 5. The guano would be at least 5 meters deep, and that would help regulate the nesting sites. So our facility also have different types of nests. We've got the nice plastic one, which is often used also at Boulders Beach. And then we also have right next to that plastic one where the two birds are scratching, there's a bird in the corner and he's sitting in a fiberglass nest. So there are various ways and types of nests out there, and there's still a lot of research happening around that. Again, we've got a couple preening each other, which is also very important for their courting as well. That just shows you how well they are. So here's an image of the chicks. When I spoke about the eggs, they lay 2 eggs per nesting season. Each egg would weigh between 90 and 100 grams. And when they hatch, they are these cute little fluff balls that make so much noise that parents then have to feed every 2 to 3 hours. So the pouch over there that I spoke about earlier on is opening up quite nicely for the babies to pop their heads in, just to stay a bit warm, because that inside that area, inside that pouch area, it is about 36 degrees Celsius. So it's nice and warm for the penguin, especially because they are exposed to natural winds, to the storm that happened recently, to the very harsh sun. That also makes the penguins get very, very hot and the penguins pant. So, sorry, I'm talking in all sorts of directions over here. But if you look at this image as well, you'll see that the penguin face is quite pink in color. And that pink is the sweat gland, or known as a gland. So the interesting thing about that pink or that gland is that they use that to cool themselves off. When it gets too hot and when that shows bright pink or dark pink rather, there's blood moving around in that area, and they're able to move blood around from that pink gland, move that blood all the way down through the body to cool them down, and then move blood up to the body, up to that gland to cool the next set of blood down. So they're able to move blood through their system to allow them and help cool them off as well, which is one interesting fact about the African penguin in general. I think, yeah, and oh, there we go. There's my babies. So those are all the penguins at the aquarium. And what you can see in the back screen over there, that says African penguins extinct by 2035. #now. Now, Helen also mentioned this earlier on. We do have a campaign at the aquarium called Not on Our Watch. And it's a really, really good campaign for the African penguins and what and how you as a member of society, a member of the country can do to help save the penguins. Because if and when the penguins do go into extinction, how can we save them? The only time you will then be able to see an African penguin would be in a facility like ours, in a facility like Sandcarp, and potentially in a facility overseas. But we want to avoid that, and we want to keep as many wild African penguins in the country as possible. So by accessing the website, there are various ways you can do that. You can write a letter to the minister and explain to the minister what and how you're feeling, what we need to do as members of the country, as a society. You can also help by keeping a distance from when you go and see penguins out in the wild. So keep your 3-meter distance, educate visitors, educate your friends, educate family, educate people that don't know much about the penguin. A lot of the time, people don't know what is happening with the African penguin. And so teach as much as you can about what needs to be done. Other ways you as an individual could help would also be to be sustainable. I mean, you can choose not to eat fish. You can choose to, eat less fish, eat less meat. Just think sustainably as to how and what you can do, and then also just go to the beach on a general basis and start picking up litter. In that way, you're not just helping save the African penguin, but you're also helping save other animals. You're helping save the environment. You're helping become sustainable in your own way for the African penguin. So yeah, so that's me. Going back to what I do. We have to place vitamins into all our food because food gets defrosted on a day-to-day basis. So we feed penguins poultices, or known as sardines, and that is also on the SASSI list. So sardines, I think, is on the orange list or on the red list. I think it's on both orange and red. And we also, as humans, we feed on, or we eat sardines. So if we continuously take food out of the ocean, there won't be enough food for the animals. And that is currently what is happening now. In our facility, we feed up penguins poultices that are defrosted, and then every single day, because food gets defrosted overnight, they lose a lot of proteins, they lose a lot of nutrients that penguins do need. So we supplement our food daily to provide that nourishment, to provide the nutrients that is essential for our penguins. Specifically because our birds are indoors, we have to make sure that they get the vitamin E, that they get the vitamin D, and that we also work in a sterile environment. So every meal is packed individually for our penguins per hour, and once the food goes into their buckets, it's standard. We don't touch the food until the next feed. So here you can see we're dividing the food up with a vitamin fish and then also a plain fish, and that helps us distinguish the difference between the two. But I think Dr. Allison also mentioned earlier on, penguins are picky. Regardless of where they are, whether they're in a captive environment, whether they're in a wild environment, whether they are in a penguin hospital like Sandcop, which is a good rehab center for our birds, they are all picky, and we need to find what works for the birds. So our fish is packed individually. It's assessed individually to see if the size is right for the penguins, because their beaks can only open a certain amount of centimeters. We need to see if the fish has got freezer burn on, they won't be able to eat that because there's a lot of bacteria that can come in with freezer burn. We also need to assess the firmness of the fish. So if the fish is too soft, or if there are guts falling out of the fish, the penguins won't eat it. And it's also not easy to feed the fish like that. If the fish has no eye, or the glands are showing, or the gills are out, and they're not flushed against the fish, then they also won't eat it. Here in this image, I'm putting the vitamins underneath the gills of the fish, and that is just to hide that, because penguins do see everything in UV, but sometimes if they do see a different color, or they see something out of the ordinary, they also won't eat the fish. This environment we are working in, we try to keep as sterile and hygienic as possible. Every facility, every compartment of the aquarium has their own little area to work in, and that is also to make sure that we don't transfer any bacteria from humans to animals, or from animals to humans. I think, Marie, you can go to the next slide. So all our penguins are named at the aquarium. Each of them have an individual name. They've got a little certificate with their name on. And so when we do feed, you can see there's a list. We then manually feed every bird one by one. And depending on the bird, some of them are slightly older. Some of them are quite young. They get special medication in this image over here. So we've got something called Epizol, which is used for cats and dogs, the vitamin E oil. That is also used in penguins to make sure that they don't scratch themselves, but also to make sure that they're not very itchy, because itchy penguins or itchy animals can also lead to concern, and itchy animals will then lead to them scratching, and sometimes they can scratch themselves open. So when penguins eat, they tend to bob their heads back and forth, and here, using their tongue and the keratinized tongue, the keratinized bristles, they are able to swallow the fish whole. They're able to move that all the way to the back of the tongue, down the throat, and digest almost immediately. A penguin can eat between 5 and 20 fish a day. and that's about a kilo per penguin. So you can imagine this tiny little bird with this tiny stomach, but so much food is eaten. And it's very important for them to be able to eat so much because they do also need to regurgitate half of what they've eaten back to the babies. Sometimes they also need to do a very long distance of walking before they get back to the nest. So they need to sustain themselves and they need to sustain things for the food for their babies. We do feed our penguins 3 times a day at the office in our facility, just to ensure that all our penguins do have a meal. We generally try to focus on the special medication in the beginning, in the mornings. Our vitamins and our supplements are important. And then from there, our birds are then able to eat as much as they want. Most of the time, we do get the older birds come into the bucket in the morning, and then we get the younger birds come into the bucket throughout the week. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shanet. Oh, there you are. Thank you so much for that. Gosh, I learned a lot today. And I thought I knew after spending so much time, but I'm mind blown. I just want to tell the primary audience, University of the Free State, that you let me know on Monday that you were working 10 years already at the aquarium.
I've been working at 10 years, yes.
But every single time we speak to you, and even in this presentation today, we can still see your enthusiasm and how passionate you are and how much you love your babies.
You know, Aisha, it's a pleasure to work with the African penguins, and I think it's also a privilege to work with the African penguin, specifically because they are an endangered species. You get to share that knowledge, you get to share that appreciation with the people around you, with the penguin community, but also you get to share this with international people, with international guests and visitors, and you get to tell people your story about the African penguin and how to preserve them, how to keep them special. I think in Cape Town, in South Africa, a lot of people come here just to see the African penguin. And when you get to tell them, oh, you know about the African penguin, you get to tell them 1 or 2 facts, people get so excited and they want to know more. So my passion comes out with wanting to share what I know with the next person.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing it with us, Shanet.
It's a pleasure.
So, Dr. Candy, I'm going to open to the classroom. While we do, I just want to read quickly a question from Roxanne Oliver. Okay, so the question was, just to clarify, was it 500 eggs that were harvested for consumption?
No,
And this is referring to cost.
500,000 eggs annually. So remember, 1.5 million eggs, 1.5 million penguins, sorry, that's a lot of penguins with a lot of eggs. So almost 20,000 eggs per nesting season. So you can imagine annually 20,000 eggs per nesting season calculates to about 500,000 eggs per year.
Oh, it's a lot. Thank you for
That is a lot.
clarifying.
It's devastating to see that, to
Devastating,
understand
yeah.
the concept.
I'm really sad. Then I'm going to open questions to our primary audience, University of the Free State. And if anyone else has a question, please raise your hand.
Hello. I would just like to ask, are there any do the African penguins differ from other penguins in a social manner other than like the sound of their calls?
So the African penguins don't. The banded penguins all are kind of similar in character, in personality. The head movements are all exactly the same, from the Galapagos, the Magellanic, the African penguin, and what's the other one? The other penguin. Sorry, the 4 banded penguins.
There. Earlier you said that with the fish, it loses proteins when you defrost it. Is that with food in general or just fish?
That is with food in general. So anything that gets defrosted, whether it be meat, fish, chicken, vegetables, fruit, anything that you freeze, normally when you pick them, they all have all the proteins, all the nutrients, all the nourishment that is there. But the minute you freeze something, everything goes flat. So you're squeezing a lot of the extreme nutrients that animals need, or that we need in general. You're squeezing that out. And so we with animals, we would need to supplement everything. It's like when we take vitamins every day, every day we take a multivitamin, we take a vitamin B complex, or we take a vitamin C shot or a ginger shot to improve our immune system. And we have to do it exactly the same with our animals.
Hi, thank you for the interesting talk. I just wanted to find out, do penguins fight?
Sorry, do penguins?
Fight with each other?
Penguins do fight. They're very territorial. So penguins like living in a colony, and they like living next to each other. But the minute a penguin gets too close to another penguin, or the minute the couples get too close, there is a territorial concern. There is a big fight that does happen. And you see it a lot in facilities because it's easier to notice rather than out in the wild. But there is precaution for something like that. In the wild, unfortunately, we can't protect the animals. A lot of the time, the fights happen because of chicks. So when a couple tend to lay eggs and the eggs don't hatch, the eggs are infertile, and there's another couple next door to them or close by that's laid an egg that have chicks. The dominant male in the one couple that doesn't have any chicks will go and they will terrorize the other couple. They will go and kill the chicks if they have to, so that their breed doesn't extend, so that they don't get to share their genetics further on. But that's most of the time. Sometimes they also do steal chicks from each other. So there are fights that happen in between.
That's very interesting. And then another thing, so obviously, I'm not sure if you mentioned it, do they have parental care?
There is parental care, and it's very cute to see. So penguins can teach humans quite a lot about courting with each other, about couples, about parental care as well. In the beginning, both parents tend to look after the chick. Both parents look after the eggs. They will incubate the eggs equally. Excuse me. They'll incubate the eggs equally. Once the chick hatches, both parents share feeding the chick. One will go out for a day or two, will eat as much as they can for themselves and for the chick, and then they would alternate as well. The minute the chick does fledge or start getting bigger for the nest, so that is at the age of 1 to 1.5 years old, the parents do start kicking the birds out of the nest. They then start becoming aggressive towards the chicks, because at that point in time, the chick is an adult. Chicks become adults at the age of 1.5 to 2 years old. At that point in time, they do still have their blue feathers, so they don't have the band yet. That will be known as their second molt when they get their band and they become a full-on adult. And at that point in time, they are no more babies or kids from previous parents.
Hi, I have another question. Has there been a case where a couple of penguins stole an egg from another couple, which it then incubated, or?
Not in our facility, but I have seen it in the wild. I have gone out and been out with research, and we've seen couples steal eggs, yes. So in a case like that, they would fight the couple off and then steal the whole nest completely. And then they would incubate the nest and then be the parents of the chick.
Any more questions, Dr. Candy, or may I move to the chat?
You can move to the chat. I also had another one, but I can't remember it now. So when I remember it, I'll let you know.
Okay, we'll get back to you. Because in the chat, we have Roxanne again, Oliver, and she is saying thank you also for the previous question. And then, is there a specific reason that the tail of the sardines are removed?
Yes, so the tail was removed because we need to distinguish the difference between the vitamins. We tend to keep one bucket for the penguins in particular, because the penguins are they're very cautious when staff get onto the beach. And so we need to be very careful when we work with the birds. We can't do any frantic movements. We can't have too many buckets. We can't have too many plates on the beach. We also are a facility where we do have guests come in, so we can't make things look very untidy. So by removing the tails of some of the fish. That would determine to me if that's a special vitamin, if it's got maybe chronic medication for a penguin, or if it's got a vitamin B complex in there, or if that is maybe all the plain fish in the one compartment, and then the fish without the tails are the fish with the tails become then the vitamin fish. So it's just to distinguish the difference between what is what in the feed bucket.
Okay, I understand. So it's like marking, a tagging, marking technique.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then Michael Bickers is saying, are penguins polite eaters? Would they get aggressive with each other when you are feeding them? And additionally, are there any sneaky feeders that try to get more fish than others?
I'd like to think that they have manners, and I'd like to think that I am a good penguin mom. But from time to time, we do have a bird that does steal food from the bucket. He'll steal it out of the bucket. We do have penguins that steal fish from each other out of their mouths. We do have penguins that fight over fish. Even though the bucket has a surplus amount of fish and there's plenty of fish for everyone, sometimes if a fish falls on the floor, they will pick it up as well.
Maybe you can just tell them, when we were there, you told us how they know which one has the vitamins in.
Oh, absolutely. Some of the birds know exactly what's got a vitamin and what doesn't. So we have to be smart about how we swap the fish over all the time. So in our bucket, we've got a divider, and every day we have to move the divider around or move the fish in different parts of the divider, so that the penguins don't remember where the vitamin fish sits.
It's funny. Dr. Candice, I don't know if you remembered your question.
Yes, I did. It's regarding the eggs. Is it only 2 eggs per couple, or have there been cases or instances where there have been more?
With the African penguins in particular, it's only 2 eggs per couple. Sometimes, in a case like us, we've got one couple that lays 1 egg per nesting season. We still trying to figure out what the concern is around that, or what has caused the bird to lay 1 egg. Because for the last couple of years, she has been laying 2 eggs, and over the last year or 2, she's then started laying 1 egg per season. So there is a question and some research that we are busy working on to see what causes them to only lay 1 egg. But with the other species, the king penguin and the emperor penguin in particular only lay 1 egg per season.
Thanks. And then my last question, you have names for your penguins, I presume. All of them have names, or only a few?
Every single penguin has a name. So I've got
But
20.
can you tell them apart? Is it
Yeah,
easy to
every
tell
penguin is
has a little
easy to tell
something?
apart.
Okay,
So what
yes.
makes African penguins very unique is their spots on their body. African penguins have these little black spots on the white chest, on their feathers, and that is similar to DNA testing. So as humans, we are all different by DNA fingerprint. Dogs are different through their different breeds. Penguins are different through their black spots on their chests, on their bellies. And the black spots are unique to each penguin. Each penguin has a different pattern. So we make patterns out of these spots in order to identify the penguins. Other distinguishers is also their head. Dr. Alison Cock was talking about how with chicks they measure the head of the chicks to see to do other research on. We also have a distinguish by looking at the head of the penguin. We can also distinguish a difference by looking at the beak length of the penguin. So each penguin's beak is at different lengths. Sometimes they also have a type of keratin that grows on the beak that also shows a difference between the birds.
And you were naming the birds when I interrupted you.
The names of our penguins, I can give you a few. We've got Chuck, we've got Labamba, we've got Aya. Aya's got 1 eye. Aya means 1 eye. And then we've got Diesel, we've got Tasman, we've got Neptune, Alan, we've got Laduma, Flippy, Jamie. We've got quite a few. That's just to mention half of what I know, what I have.
That's very cute. And then there was another question. I'm not sure if you mentioned it or somebody mentioned it throughout the day. What is the average age of a penguin? So how long do they live?
In captivity, and a lifespan for a penguin is between from 30 years and up. Just because there are no predators, the bird is cared for. They're in an environment where it's sterile. They are looked after. The facility that they stay in is cleaned on a daily basis. In the wild, 10 to 12 years is the maximum lifespan. So I missed a few of I missed the Dr. Allison's presentation in the beginning, but the predators of the African penguin are or is the orca whales and sharks, and then other wildcats, the honey badger that we've recently discovered. So they do have other predators, and then we also have the domestic dog which is found in the human household, especially around the Boulders Beach colony that could also attack a penguin.
Yeah, thank you so much. It was really, really, really interesting.
I'm really glad you enjoyed it.
Thank you, Dr. Anderson class. Shanet, I also want to say, in addition to the markings, I think you know the personalities. I mean, we just got to know Ayoba because he loved the camera and we had cameras, but I think you can differentiate them by now with the personalities. Am I right?
So exactly, our penguins all have different personalities. We know when a bird is not doing too well. We know the character of the penguin. So in order to be able to feed a penguin, you do need to know the personality. You do need to know the character. You need to know how they walk per se. Even though they all might look like they walk the same, they do have a variation of walking. So you kind of need to be able to identify the penguin from the back. Now, overall, all penguins are black and white. Black and white, with the black being camouflaged to the top of the surface of the water, and then the white that blends in with the bottom of the surface when light reflects into the water and back up onto the penguin. It camouflages quite well. So here we need to be able to identify penguins that are swimming, and also by the way they behave on the beach. So yeah, to answer the question, they do have different personalities, they do have different characters, and we need to be able to identify them.
Yeah, that makes them even cuter. And then I have one last question, and I think, yeah, the time is running out. So just one last question, and this is also just to let Prof. Liesel know. When I said the word parasites the other day, you got excited, and that doesn't usually happen. So you're like one of us. So would you please tell us any current research or future research or past research that have been done on parasites, please?
At the aquarium, we've done quite a few projects on these on parasites. We tend to, because we also we're an aquarium, so we have a lot of fish in our aquarium. We also do bring in fish from the wild, and sometimes whatever comes in from the wild does bring their friends along. So when we do see the parasites, we do get excited. We do want to know more about the parasites. With penguins in particular, we got something called babesia, and then you also get malaria. Those are the two main parasites, and avian influenza is the big one as well around the penguins. We try to keep that away from a captive environment. They do also get the flu, common flu, and that is zoonotic. So anyone that walks into the aquarium, coughing in the exhibit, sneezing, your spores are all over. One day a penguin will cough, they'll sneeze, and then they'll have it for about 2 days, and then it will just phase out. With regards to fish and other parasites, we collect them. We do want to know more about parasites. So it is an interesting topic that we do keep back on quite a high part of our schedules and a high part of our research, to understand more about parasites.
I just want to go back to the malaria, because I learned this now when I was there with you. So how do you manage that?
It's a very sensitive process when you manage malaria. we put them on a very high dose of antibiotics. The penguins are also then isolated because it can be, they can, it is a zoonotic, well, not zoonotic, they can transfer to another penguin. So when that does happen, the malaria, it's because of the mosquitoes that come in, we do have to then isolate the environment. So we in a facility, in a captive facility, one should protect the birds by either putting them in an enclosed environment with mosquito nets. Insect repellent is also very good to use around birds. Natural repellents like lemon balm, lavender, citronella oils, citronella plants, those are natural insect repellents that can be used around birds, around a lot of animals, because it's not chemicalized. And then also as humans, you can also use that as well.
Thank you, Shanet. I don't think there's any more questions. Okay, so with that, yeah, from the whole SSA team, thank you very much again